Okay, I see John DeVal has entered, John Samuelson has entered, and Ed Joubert has entered.
Someone just tell me when we can begin.
You can begin now,
You can go,
Carl.
Carl.
All right. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, this meeting will be held remotely in an online conference mode hosted on zoom.com, and members of the public will not be able to physically attend. The meeting will be broadcast live on Comcast Channel 12 and can also be viewed via live stream at WHCA TV. It will subsequently be broadcast on youtube.com. And we'll begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll begin the meeting with a moment of silence. Meetings being recorded and televised by the local cable company. I'd like a motion to approve bill and payroll warrants.
So move, Dan.
second, Brian.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, roll call vote. Randy?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And Justin?
Yes.
I'd like a motion to accept correspondence in the read file.
So move, Dan.
Second, Brian.
Any questions? Discussion? Okay, Justin?
Yes.
Oh, okay, and Randy?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes too. And Laurie, I also will vote yes on the approval of bill and payroll warrants. Approval of meeting minutes, open session, June 9th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So move, Dan.
Second, Brian.
Any questions? Okay, Randy,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Open session on June 23rd, 2020.
Dan motions.
Brian, second.
Okay, any questions? Okay, Randy,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Open session minutes for open session on June 30th, 2020.
Dan motions.
Brian, second.
Questions? Okay, Dan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Meeting minutes of the open session on July 14th, 2020.
Dan motions.
Brian, second.
Any questions? Randy,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. And finally, open session on July 28th, 2020, their minutes.
Dan motions.
Brian, second.
Okay, Justin,
Yes.
Brian,
Get that, Nance?
Brian,
Yes.
okay, Dan,
Yes.
okay, Randy,
That might be the phone.
Come on, man.
okay, thank
Yes.
you. Have we done the 28th yet? I got all confused with
Your
Dan's
pizza's
phone.
ready.
Sorry, my wife finally got it.
Can we have a motion for, to accept the minutes of July 28th, 2020?
Dan motions.
Brian, second.
All right, Justin,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. We have three scheduled meetings tonight. The first one is a public meeting with respect of the application of European Audio Sales Incorporated for a Class II auto dealer's license on the premises located at 305 Temple Street. A note to us, to the Board of Selectmen, the applicant currently holds a Class II license at this location. She's simply changing from a DBA to a corporation. Is there a motion?
Dan motions.
Brian, second.
Brian. And The Andressa Vieira, are you there?
I just moved her into the chat. Yeah.
Yes.
She is. Hi, Andressa. Do you have anything you'd like to say? We've moved and seconded giving you the Class 2 auto dealer's license.
Yes, no, everything is fine. We're very stable on that location. And the only reason, like you said, it was just change of a name from a DBA to a corporation to make it easy for me and my husband, you know, move on with the business.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
No.
Okay, well, we'll vote. Randy,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Justin.
Yes.
Congratulations, Andressa. You're all done. And
All right,
and thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a
Second.
good night.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Public hearing with respect to the application of Old Colony Brewing Incorporated for a farmer's series pouring permit on the premises located at 599 Washington Street, subject to receipt of the mailing, advertising, and license fees, final inspection approval of the building commissioner, fire chief, and the Board of Health, and the approval of the ABCC. Is there a motion?
Motion by Dan.
Second, Brian.
Okay, Brian. And Dennis is here. Dennis, do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, I'll just say, thanks for having me back again. So our plans at this spot is very similar to what we're doing today at the 605 Bedford Street. Opening up there, opening that location. And when we do that, we will forfeit the license that we have at 605 Bedford Street, and just brew the beer there, but have the tap room at the 599 Washington Street with the ability to pretty much do exactly what we do today, but at that location.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions?
No, that's good.
Actually,
Okay,
yeah,
Yes, Justin.
just Dennis, if you're forfeiting the license up on Bedford Street, do you have an outdoor dining scenario planned out for Washington Street?
We do not. We will just go with the indoor dining only with under 25 people indoors like we do today. That the Governor Baker had said you could still do, as long as you're, meeting all the regulations and the 6 feet, we won't have any outdoor dining. The only thing we do have at that location that's a little different is we do have, not that this changes anything, but have the windows in the front open up, so it does air out the place a little bit more. But we will not be doing outdoor seating.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we're ready for the vote. Randy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Dan?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi,
Brian?
John Bell.
Yes.
And Justin?
Hold on, I think someone's before I vote. I think Eric Hubert's.
Well, I'm asking, there are several people here who would like to speak, I think.
Oh.
I'm unmuting them.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And Mr. Jubert, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I would. Thank you. My concern there is for the amount of parking that is available and what contingencies have been made. If it's a potential 68-seat establishment, there's very little parking as is, and we have 2 large projects that haven't come online yet, which will impact parking as well. So how will we handle the additional parking in the downtown?
I'm going to ask you to hold your question for a moment because I suspect the other speakers will have similar questions. John DeVal, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I wrote it down a little bit. My family has been in business on corner Washington Street for 74 years, and we've seen a lot of changes, and we're happy that we have a very active center. The vast majority of businesses on Washington Street need a quick turnover of customers. The parking usually requires 10 to 15 minutes. We are very concerned about a parking situation. As you know, there are no parking restrictions in the center. We have people park the cars and leave them all day sometimes. There is no restriction. There is nothing we can do about it. Now we have the brewing company that would like 68 people to be able to come to their location. If in fact 2 people came in cars, that would take up 17 parking spaces. There were only 20 spaces out in front. So I just think it's a rough situation. It would leave 3 spaces for all the other businesses, and that would leave for cars having to park on side streets and residential areas. In addition to that, there are already, as Ed had mentioned, large projects planned for both sides of Washington Street next to the Old Colony. The other fear I have is the anticipated increase in traffic may cause the state to require traffic lights in both intersections. That would be fine for the traffic, but it requires parallel parking, which reduce all the spaces down from 20 down to 8. We want everybody to have success in their businesses, but not at the expense of other businesses. Thank you for hearing me.
Okay, Mr. Samuelson, you need to unmute to speak. You're live and your mic is open, Mr. Samuelson.
Do you have that folder?
I'm so sorry.
Addressed by Mr. Joubert and Mr. Duval.
Okay, you're coming in extremely faintly. We could only hear a couple of words. If I understand what you said, you're sharing the concerns of Mr. Joubert and Mr. Duval.
That is correct.
Okay, Craig Duval, are you seeking to comment?
Yes, I'm sorry. I basically just share the same concerns as my dad and Mr. Joubert and Mr. Samuelson.
Okay, I asked Bob Curran, because he's a zoning officer and he was involved in the downtown district zoning, to join us. And Barb, if you're available now, appreciate it if you would address the comments that were just made.
Yes, Frank. As you are all aware, the town of Whitman adopted a mixed-use overlay district, which allowed the apartments to be put above this building that this license is being applied for. Downtown area, it's a bar or a business is allowed by right. They don't have to go to the Board of Appeals, and it's never been questioned whether or not there's sufficient parking. I have not set the occupant load of this building. I don't know whether or not they've applied for license to serve up to 60, was it 68 people?
I think, you know, on the application, it did ask for the number. I think I just put what you had granted at the current location.
Right.
Just as, because you haven't approved it yet, but that was what we had at our current spot, so that's what I put it.
Right. So depending on the floor plan that I get, once the, I'm sure the selectmen have a copy of that floor plan now, but the, my office will set the occupant load of, and the number of customers that can be allowed in the building. I have no reason to think that there will be an issue downtown. More than likely, I think the traffic there or the customers will be there more in the late afternoon or evening. In the weekends, typically, there's not a lot of cars parked downtown. I don't think that this is going to be an issue at all. And they're not required to go to the zoning board.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Is there anyone else, Frank, that wants to speak?
The mics are open, folks.
Could I ask Dennis, could I have a response to what you have planned for the mitigation of the traffic? You're bringing quite a bit more downtown.
That's Mr. Joubert.
Sure. I mean, I think when we looked at that location, you know, you mentioned 18 spots. I think there's, you know, between the corner of South Ave and West Street, there's 52 spots total. And what we had done is looked at the, you know, our hours that we'd probably plan on doing, which will be, as Mr. Curran said, late evening, early evening to, you know, at night, which we went down there plenty of time to make sure, because we were also worried about parking. And, you know, on that side, besides Supreme at an evening, there's no other businesses that are usually open. So those spots do end up, you know, being empty most of the time. On the other side of Washington, where there's already a few restaurants, is usually where most of the cars are already parked. So that was our thoughts on that. And if we're looking at the kind of the current number of people we have on a normal day, we're hoping to increase that. But you're most of the time, if we're having, especially to start with, if we're having 40 or 50 patrons, you're probably usually only talking 10 or 20 cars. I mean 10 or 20.
Well, I hope you can appreciate that my concern is that my open parking lot will be the target for the overflow, and that those spaces are for my tenants and have to be protected.
Yes, and one of the things that we'll do, like a lot of other places do, is when we publish on our website and all of our social media of where they're allowed to park and where they're not allowed to, all of the open spots, the parking lots down across, behind the church there, a few other spots, but really it's just the main ones that I described. And as I said, is if our hours are right now looking 5 to 10 at night and on the weekends, just Thursday and Friday, to start with at least, most, as I've done many drives down there, most of those spots between Washington Street and West Street are usually empty, as those, the banks are closed, and a lot of the other a lot of the other locations except Supreme seem to be closed at that point in time.
This is John Duval. Could I ask another question?
Go ahead, John.
Okay, my concern is we have no recourse. Should you or any other business have people park in front of all of our stores, there's nothing we can do about it. You can park there all day long. There's no reason. We can call the police, but they can't have you move because it's perfectly open to park there all day long. And we have people from other businesses in the area that park there. We have had people from both banks across the street park there all day. The banks will take care of it after we talk to people, but it's a continual problem. We've even had people park there to go to Boston to go to work. So I just think we need some kind of relief. Should your new people kind of load up the center of town?
Bob?
Carl, I kind of understand where Mr. Duval's coming from, and I'm wondering if we have ever, or should we consider maybe a 30-minute parking area for that stretch right in front of the businesses, because he's made valid points. I mean, if somebody is going to go to Boston, they're going to be gone all day. That space is ruined. And I understand that the parking that's down where the old Baptist church was, and there is a significant amount of parking around the park, which is not that far from where this business is going to be. But I think we have to be fair about this, that maybe at some point we have to visit that idea that we might have to be able to shuffle that parking space in and out as often as we can.
Frank?
We have addressed this issue, to my recollection, 3 times in the last 18 years. Each time a proposal was made to limit the time people may park on the street. And in one instance, it was an hour. In another instance, it was 2. The merchants were pretty adamant about opposing parking limits. Some of them, others supported it. But each time we brought it forward, it failed. I would say that a proposal to limit parking to 30 minutes serves no one. You may need more time than that just to go to the bank. Or if you're in the pharmacy and you're waiting for a script to be filled, you don't have to worry about running outside because you've been there 30 minutes.
We're faster than that. No. I'm kidding.
But
I have a question, or I have a point. I know restaurants and bars need more time. They really, if you go to a bar for a drink or 2 and you meet your friends, you need more time. But we need time for the parking. I wouldn't be afraid of 2 hours. I wouldn't be afraid of no parking restrictions after 5 o'clock, things like that. But I think when you have the restaurant business and the bar business competes against the retail business, we end up never getting anything done.
So what is your suggestion, John?
My suggestion is 2-hour parking up till 5 o'clock, Monday through Friday. And all of my tenants would be happy with that. That's 8 different businesses.
May I, Carl?
Yes.
Okay, my issue, I think, is it's employees who have jobs in the center of town. Like John was saying, the bank across the street. The bank has ample parking in back for their employees, but for convenience sake, they'll use Washington Street. I know that John went to the extent for his employees to put parking behind his building. And I thank him for that. I was just quite curious. I know that the gentleman that owns Supreme Pizza, I believe he owns that stretch of stores or storefronts that we're talking about. Does he have any additional parking in back?
So he's given Old Colony Brewing got 1 parking spot in the back. So we have one. Yes, for 1 employee, yeah, we can park in the back, one car. And I think from my understanding is each of the 3 units, and I can't speak for the other ones. I know the 3 new units that they redid, that there was one spot for each in the back, and I don't know, I can't speak for what he did for the apartments.
Right. I have an issue for the apartments, like John says, he needs spaces for the apartments above his building. I would have to assume that those spaces are behind his building and not on Washington Street. But I would say that we should have a sign saying no all-day parking. I can't see somebody parking on Washington Street and walking all the way down to the T station to take the train to go into Boston. I can't see that. But yet, I wouldn't walk that distance to go to Boston. I'd park down there. That being said, there's got to be a reasonable solution to this issue, because I don't want to stop any business from going into the center of town.
And can I just say, I mean, to speak to what Mr. Duvall said is, his 2-hour, Monday through Friday. I mean, for me, that wouldn't affect us as we're not looking at opening Monday through Friday before 5 o'clock anyways. At least as of right now, Thursday, Friday evenings, and Saturday and Sunday. So, and I understand the 2 hours. I mean, we want people to come in and stay for a few, but knowing it is, we're mainly selling alcohol that, our patrons usually aren't there more than 2 hours anyways, because, at some point we will be shutting them off because they've had, before they have a few too many.
Dennis, again, what are the hours you plan to operate?
To start with, our plan would be, 5 to 10 on Friday, Thursday and Friday. Saturday would be 12 to 10 and Sunday would be 12 to 8. That being said, is our license does give, at least in the past, is giving us more time. And this is just, us starting up. I don't, unfortunately, I also have a day job, so I can't open before 5. My goal is not to open usually during the week, during the day, unless it was a special occasion, right? If you had St. Patrick's Day fall on a weekday, or, sometimes in the past, like March Madness, which if it ever happens again, we might open Thursday and Friday a little earlier so you can come in and watch the games. But our regular time would not, would be, wouldn't open till 5 o'clock on a weekday. And that could expand to Wednesday nights and so on, depending on how business is going.
I have another comment, Carl.
Carl, before that, Mr. Samuelson has a question to ask. He posted in the chat.
So Supreme is our landlord, and they took away all of my parking for my workers. So all our workers are parking in the front. So that could be anywhere between 3 and 5 workers at a time. So that takes that space. Plus, we obviously have clients that are coming in. We do have services that could last up to 2 hours, if not longer. So I guess going back to the 30-minute, that would be very tough for my business in order to restrict a timeline. So in any event, like I said, the landlord unfortunately took all of our parking. We had parking and they promised us parking, but then they took it away from us. So like I said, right now we're parking in the front and, we're obviously taking up other people's parking spaces. And unfortunately we have no other choice but to park there. So, parking is just a disaster and, it's going to be very difficult now, with the added business, which is great for the added business because we get a lot of foot traffic. But, again, if I have an 80-year-old lady that wants to get her hair done and she has to, park in front of Family Dollar, obviously I'm going to lose that client.
Frank, you had something to say?
Yeah, John, it's been a long time since I've had to deal with parking issues here or elsewhere, but one of the things that we did to make sure that customers had access to the town hall is we instructed employees not to park in front of the business. I mean, there are parking spaces that your employees could use other than on Washington Street or Whitman Ave. It just might mean walking a little further. You might want to consider that. As Bob Curran noted, this process is as of right, and in order for us to limit it, we can't allocate spaces to any one business. We would have to set global limits that apply to everybody if we're going to determine that there has to be a limited amount of time parking, whether that be 2 hours, an hour and a half, or 2.5 hours. And then it will be an issue of enforcement as well. So I think we all probably have to try and work together and see how this comes together. And if it becomes a problem, maybe we regroup as a group of businesses with my office and we work out something that addresses the issues for everybody.
Like a plan.
Yeah, I'm definitely not opposed, to obviously working together and doing all that. That is fine. Again, I don't think it's fair that, one of my workers has to walk a half a mile in 90-degree heat, or whatever to get to, her job. But in any event, we can see, what that, does if they can walk a little further. But, again, what's going to naturally happen is they're just going to, park in front of the bank.
I get that, but understand that if they're parking there, your customer can't park there. And for me, operating as a business, I would be concerned about that.
Justin, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to kind of second what Frank was saying. This is, at least the timing of this right now, as we progress through COVID phases, the parking is not going to be an issue right away. It's going to slowly creep up on us. So I think this is something that we could revisit sometime in the future.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to say? I think
the last thing I want to say is that we do overlap with the old brewery there. So we're open till 8 o'clock Tuesday through Friday. So we will have like a 3-hour overlap. Obviously the night is a little bit slower for us. So again, I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue, but I just wanted to, let that be known that, it may be quiet, but, there are businesses besides Supreme that are open. That just want to, again, make that aware.
And I commit that we will do what we can to work with all of the businesses to make sure that we're addressing the collective needs.
Okay, I think I'm going to do the vote again, guys. We started it before the discussion started. So now that we've been able to hear all of the comments, I'll call for a vote again. I'll start with you, Randy.
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. And we'll, going forward, Frank, you'll take care of getting people together if there's an issue and trying
I will.
to. Okay, the next public meeting is with respect to the application of Old Colony Brewery Incorporated for a common victualer's license on the premises located at 599 Washington Street, subject to receipt of the license fee and final inspection approval of the building commissioner and the Board of Health. Is there a
So
motion? Is there a second?
Second, Brian.
And does anyone want to speak on this? Okay, we'll start with you, Justin.
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Dennis, nice presentation tonight. Good luck.
Thank you guys very much. Thank
Best
you.
of luck.
Thank you.
Okay, it deals with the public hearings. First item on the agenda is the COVID-19 update.
Thank you,
Frank.
Carl. There are a couple of things we need to address tonight. One of them is the governor has come out with a policy regarding travel and what needs to be done when people travel out of state into the states that are not on what I guess I can call the good list. I've circulated the draft policy to all departments, and you all have received it probably a week ago. And I would ask that the board adopt this policy in order to ensure that we're doing our part to manage COVID.
Is there a motion to draft the travel policy? And it has the travel notice attached to it for the staff.
So moved. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Brian.
Any
I do have a
discussion?
question. I have a question if you don't mind.
Brian? Go ahead.
I can't seem to locate where it was, but Frank, is there any exemptions that would fall on town employees, whether it be essential workers or anything like that in this plan?
Unlike the original COVID requirement, this does not exempt public safety personnel. Everyone, this applies to everyone. And it also applies, I hate to use this word, intermittently, because if you're traveling on vacation, then you have the certification that you're COVID-free, or you have a 14-day quarantine. However, it takes 10 days today to get a test result in the worst of cases. It does not apply if you're if you're shopping. For example, Rhode Island's on the bad list. If you drive across the border to buy a six-pack or whatever, and then come back home, that's not considered travel. However, when you travel overnight for vacation, that is considered a travel. This is self-reporting too. People actually have to certify that they've done what's necessary to comply with the policy. And that's I'm not going to call it a law. It's a regulation promulgated by the governor's office.
I would assume that the governor will have the ability to use Easy Pass records to find out if you've gone out of state or not.
I'm hoping it doesn't get that detailed, but certainly there are ways.
Justin?
So first, Brian, when I'd read the exemptions at first, I thought the same thing as you, but looking back at it, this order exempts critical infrastructure employees who come into the state to do work on that infrastructure. Right. So if we called in mutual aid from a, Providence fire, they'd be exempt, but apart from that, it doesn't. On this, I had wanted to ask if we could specifically write in the test requirement into our version, because it is a little, it's in there as an exemption under the governor's requests, but to have, prove either a negative test or quarantine for 14 days, I think it'll be clearer in our version of the policy.
What I tried to do, Justin, is to not write anything in that further limits the compliance with the policy. The regulation is specific. If whether our policy says it or not, if they're violating the regulation, then they're in violation. I suppose we could add it, but I'm just not sure that it's necessary to duly define it. I don't know.
Frank, can I chime in a little bit on that?
Sure.
So I've been doing some research on the COVID, the testing. And we have an echo, so.
I just muted Frank to try and fix that.
I get an echo. So, you know, the government just came out with some updated COVID testing to make it a little bit easier for people who are not symptomatic to obtain tests. So, but what you have to do is you have to call the test sites to make an appointment. So, for instance, if you call Brockton, you get 3 prompts. They ask you if you are a patient of Brockton Community Health, if you are symptomatic, and the third prompt is if you are neither, hit number 3. When you hit number 3, you get disconnected. If you hit 1, you hold on for a long period of time. The wait time is just ridiculous. Some of the other testing sites, say Norwell, has 2 testing sites. One of the sites, if you need to go there to have a test, you need to make an appointment. The test is going to cost you $160. It is not free, although with the new governor regulations and new updates, supposedly it's going to become free. And then they say, because you are not symptomatic, it could be 7 to 10 days before you even get the results. It's difficult for folks who do have some vacation plans out of state, who have booked or purchased tickets to an event prior to any of this going into effect. And if they do not go, they're not refunded any money. So basically you're losing all the money that you've invested into this travel. So they're not making it very easy for people in going to a different state. Some of those states, including states that people have travel plans to, you have to be a resident of that state in order to receive a test. And then there's no guarantee that you're going to get your result before you leave that state, and how would you get it from that state to Massachusetts? So to require someone to have a test within 72 hours of returning from another state, you can't have it done because some of the states require you to be a resident. So your only other option is to come back to Massachusetts and quarantine until you can get an appointment or try and make an appointment before you come back. Go have the test done and then sit and wait for the result. So it's not a very easy process at all that is putting people to. So our choices are don't go, lose money, or come back, quarantine, go get the test, pay for it or not pay for it, and then wait for a result. So not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Brian?
One question. Let's say we have an employee that goes to Florida, Disney World, if they open up or whatever, it doesn't matter. And they come back and this scenario happens like Lisa just proposed that happens. Now, let's say they don't get their test back for a week or 10 days. I mean, basically the 2 weeks has gone by through no fault of their own because of the timing of these tests. Do they still have to use their own personal time, or is this a COVID-related thing where they should get paid anyway, like we had, in essence, we didn't furlough, but we did furlough and we paid everybody anyways, so wouldn't this be the same?
Oh, Frank, you're still muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
Part of the policy intent is to address the difference between discretion and need. I was scheduled to go to Vermont next week. My wife and I have decided to cancel that trip, in part because we keep going on and off the Vermont limit list. And I'm frankly not that thrilled about driving 220 miles to just sit in one place. I can do that just as easily at home. But the issue is the notice for travel requires notification of the employer. I think it's irresponsible for an employee to decide on their own, we're going to travel somewhere, and if we have to quarantine, it's your problem. The employer, in that case, if there's concern, can say, hey, we're not approving this vacation, or we're not approving this travel. There has to be some give and take.
Yeah.
And the answer is, the short answer is, there is a COVID-19 leave policy that's under the American CARES Act. However, the governor's order and the policy here take into consideration that that is based on necessity rather than convenience.
I guess related to that, would we allow employees to use sick time if they're required to quarantine?
I would say yes.
Okay.
You have available time, you need to quarantine because you went on vacation. I would think that's an appropriate use of your sick time.
Dan?
Yeah, what about working from home? If they're quarantined for 2 weeks?
We've done that too, Dan.
Huh?
We've done that too.
Right, so I mean, that's a possibility, except for, we'll say if you're in a department where you have, police, fire, DPW, something like that, but town hall employees, if it's all available for them to work at home, there's a possibility that it's a decision.
Yeah, certain employees can work at home,
Right. Yeah.
others can't. But that's also a consideration when we address the need for quarantine. But let's be practical about this. We're in a pandemic. No question on anybody's part that we're there. You have to do some responsible things to help control the spread. And one of those things is limiting your exposure by traveling to places where there are problems. I mean, I just don't understand how anyone would want to go right now to Florida or Texas or any of those places where the cases are mushrooming. But that's an individual choice.
So they could have made their appointment a year ago, for vacation. And
I made my commitment to go to Vermont January 1st when I wrote a check, or more accurately, when I bought the place. But it's been on my plans for a long time. People have changed plans because of the circumstances surrounding COVID. I think we all have.
I canceled a wedding I was supposed to go to in Seattle.
My nephew's wedding was canceled, and that had been planned for a year and a half.
Did they get their money back, or did they lose the money?
Fortunately, they got their money back.
Well, that's good then. But some people don't get their money back.
So if you're not going to get your money back, it's okay to go expose yourself?
No, I mean, it's their decision.
No, you can take precautions depending on where you're going, because you know that where you are going, they're limiting the amount of people in there and social distancing by the reserved seating and things like that. But I mean, my plans, again, we booked it in advance. The event is not canceled. They've been running these events. I mean, I'm not going to any of the hot states. I'm driving, camping in my own motorhome, not staying in a hotel. So I'm not getting on a plane or anything. And pretty much the events we're going to are all outside. So we're not indoors anywhere.
You didn't mention the best part. You better have to stay at home.
You know,
it shouldn't be
it's
like-
something that my father and I have planned, and based, you know, based on the year that my family has experienced, I think it's important for him to go
Right.
to this event
Sure.
because
Yeah.
it helps with the healing process on his part.
Absolutely.
I think Randy had something he wanted to say.
Randy, is something you'd like to say? Like to move the question, maybe?
In a second, I'll get to you, Kyle. Well, I think we have a quarantine policy because we are supposed to be trying to limit travel, but there are other circumstances where people can't. So I guess for myself, what are we exactly doing with this policy, Frank?
All we're doing is we're reiterating the governor's
we're forcing a 14-day quarantine into a negative COVID test is presented. Is that the kind of the nuts and bolts of it?
that we're reiterating what the state policy is, and we've adopted it locally to provide that additional notice to our people. So they're not relying on an email from the state. It refers directly to the state policies.
All right, then I will take the chairman's guidance and make a motion to move the question.
Is there a second to that? Is there a second to that motion? Okay, have a quick vote on the motion to move the question. Randy?
Yes.
Dan?
Yeah.
Brian?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Okay, on approving the policy that mirrors the states. Randy?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. Okay, thank you. Frank, there's another COVID-related issue that came up, had to do with whether or not town hall should be open to the public.
Yes, the question has been raised. I researched, the state has a COVID listserv, which provided information from places all over the state. And I was more concerned about finding out what we're doing locally. So I sent a request out to the surrounding communities to gauge how towns are handling this quickly. Our current status is all employees are at work. We are delivering all town services that are requested through alternative means. And by that, I mean, if you're making a payment on a municipal bill, we have a drop box you can place it in. You can mail it, or you can pay online through our website. If you're voting, we are mailing ballots out. You may bring them and drop them in our drop box. If you have something that requires direct communication and contact with a town employee, we are handling those on a schedule basis. We've set up 2 meeting areas in the auditorium that are sufficiently spaced to provide both privacy and social distancing for people who need to come to us to handle things. So the question,
are those by appointment?
yes.
Okay.
So the question now becomes, should we open the door and just let people come in at will? We have set up a temperature station by the handicap door. Everyone entering the town hall today has to come in through that door and pause at the temperature station to confirm that they're not feverish. It's worked pretty well. Visitors coming in are also brought in that way and are required to do the same thing. In point of fact, we had one person come in who actually set off the alarm. We allowed him to step out and wait a few minutes to see if it was just a result of being in a hot car or if he really was feverish. And he then cleared the station. But we're managing that. If we open to the public on a as on-demand basis, we're not going to be able to do that unless we hire somebody to attend to the door. The survey reflected the significant majority of surrounding towns are doing exactly what we're doing. They've closed their senior centers, they've closed their libraries, and they're maintaining their town services and are requiring appointments to enter the town halls. I think there's 3 town halls, perhaps 4, that are just open for the public to walk in. Of those 4, 2 of them, you can only come through one door and there's an attendant there. We're not staffed well enough to assign somebody to sit at the table. So I will do whatever the board chooses. But I think at this point, we should give it at least until the schools return to see how things progress. We've had a week or so of high numbers, and the numbers have dropped off the last 2 days. But I just would hate to see us eliminate those limitations and then have an employee contract COVID. That, by the way, happened in, was it Freetown? Linda, what town was it? Fairhaven.
Fairhaven.
They actually closed the town hall and had to decom the building.
Okay, yes. Anyone have any thoughts on the matter? There have been some people who thought that we should have the town hall open. So I asked Frank to do a survey to see if other towns were handling it the same way we were. The survey shows to me that the vast majority of the towns are doing what we're doing. We're not reducing services to people, but we're not allowing people to walk willy-nilly into the town hall whenever they feel like it. Randy? Randy, I thought you had your hand up.
Would you say, yeah, I did. Thank you. Frank, would you say that there's any services that we're not providing by not allowing public access, or is it just, I guess, just like a lot of things due to COVID, more of an inconvenience that people lose the ability to, I guess, on a spur of the moment, get in and handle something quickly? And
there are 2 answers to that.
What's that?
There are 2 answers to that. We have discontinued the passport program. And that was almost immediately after COVID came in. The other issue is there was at least one person questioning what they felt was their inability to get a marriage license. I did talk to the town clerk. In fact, I spoke with her today. She is doing licenses by appointment on Tuesdays from, I think, mid-afternoon till 7 o'clock. So, and she does those at the portico. People come up to the west side door and she will present them with their information and administer whatever oath or certifications have to be done. So to my knowledge, we are not preventing anyone from receiving any of the services that they would expect from the town of Whitman, other than the senior center.
I mean, I would just say then, I think with the needle moving more towards erring on the side of caution than opening up further, I think, I think we've been pretty lucky as a town of, I don't think we've had any employees exposed. And, are we, if we're not sacrificing services, I would say status quo. And that would include, are we having any lag in bills getting paid, or how is about Bob handling inspections and permitting and things like that? Inspectional
services is right on time. People are submitting their applications through the Dropbox. They're being communicated with verbally if information is needed. I see no barrier there. The Board of Health is always a happy target for people. Right now, what we're getting are calls from people who are reporting other neighbors having gatherings and parties. But so far as I know, we're delivering all of our services. The assessor is on top of things. We have not seen a hiccup in our receipts, which is encouraging. And all in all, I think we've managed well through the crisis.
Anyone else? Dan?
Yeah, Frank, I have to agree with Randy. I mean, first of all, we just talked about employees going on a long trip and then coming back, and they have to be quarantined if they don't get a test in time. And now with, you know, to even think about opening up town hall and having people come in and not knowing where they've been or what they've done. We are performing all the services to the townspeople. So I have to agree with Randy, you know, let's go on the side of precaution and maintain it until the governor feels that there's a remedy or there's a vaccine that we could take, and our people are safe and our town employees are safe.
Anyone else? Yes, Justin.
Just wanted to ask how we were going to handle the state primary election on September 1st and the week of early voting before that.
The clerk is going to handle it the same way she handled the local election, with one entry, one exit. She's purchased separator stands, the kind you see in movies where you can set up ribbons to channel people through certain areas, and we'll continually disinfect during that process.
Will we keep town employees in the building on that day while presumably hundreds of thousands of people are moving through?
Question. The clerk, Don Barley, has recommended that we have all non-essential employees not be in the building. In fact, she's recommended that we close all the offices so people don't have a tendency to wander around looking for other services. I did mean to put that on the agenda and it slipped my mind. The recommendation is to have only election personnel in the building.
That makes sense.
Justin, you work.
And that would be both for
Not
the
right now.
primary and general.
Okay, well, so the consensus then is to keep on doing what we're doing and maintaining caution in this time, because things aren't really getting any better. And we've been lucky in this state because we've kept it controlled so far. And knock on wood.
Do we,
next up.
do we need a motion to have everybody else not be in the building for the primary day?
I think that would be appropriate.
I'd make that.
If that's what we're going to do, should be a motion to close all other offices for the primary and general election.
Yeah, I'd make that.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, and this is basically to support the clerk's plan.
Yeah.
Any discussion? Okay, Justin?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Next three items on the agenda are kind of related. We're just going to discuss the retirement of the current town administrator, review his job description, and discuss the selection process for the future town administrator. Frank, take it away.
Okay. What I distributed was current job description because I thought it would be an appropriate time for the board to review it and perhaps identify any changes you may wish to make. I'm not suggesting we do that tonight. I'm suggesting that it be reviewed and revisited at our next meeting. I also have reached out to a couple of vendors that handle searches for management personnel. And clearly, Paradigm is the leader in the industry. And the recommendations that they have, it's twofold. The vast majority of Paradigm's placements have been using a selection committee. There were 3 instances where Paradigm solely developed the candidates and then presented the candidates to the Board of Selectmen for interview and approval or vote. Both make sense. From a community perspective, if we were to go with a search committee, I would recommend strongly that it be limited. We not have a huge committee, that it involve 2 selectmen, another town official, and in this case, I would recommend the treasurer collector. I would also recommend that the assistant superintendent of schools be part of that committee, and a citizen at large. If you wanted to make it bigger, 3 citizens at large instead of 1. That's, of course, if you want to utilize a committee. If you don't, then someone's going to have to coordinate with the contractor with respect to his working to develop candidates and do some type of pre-qualifications. So I guess the first question would be, how does the board feel about whether we need a search committee to work with a contractor as opposed to simply seeking candidates through a contractor? So I'd open that question to the board.
Okay, people, go ahead. I'm wondering, Randy, you had your hand up.
I don't see it. I think we have a strong enough board to be able to choose your successor, Frank, and I think that's what the people voted us for. I think when you start getting into, widespread committees, I think focus gets lost on the task at hand. I thought the way I envisioned this is we would, hire the company and have them give us 3 to 5 candidates, and then as a board, as the Board of Selectmen, conduct interviews and make a uniform consensus of who we'd hire. I noticed you put some people down, recommended some people, Frank. We're the people that are dealing with it constantly.
Right.
And I don't remember being asked to be on the search committee for the superintendent. So I don't know how much educational perspective helps us out here, but I think we have a strong enough committee, and if we're going to hire a company, I think we let them narrow it down to either 3 to 5 candidates based on the qualifications this board sets, and then we conduct public interviews and we make a consensus as the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah. Anyone else have a thought on this? Brian.
I guess I agree with Randy on this. I think people voted us in for a reason, and they wanted us to be in charge of their affairs. And I think for us to make the decision of who's going to be there in our best opinion to carry on the work of the citizens is our charge. Do we want to have some help with professional services to garner the candidates? I think that's a great idea, because while I'm not fond of spending money, this is an important position, and I think to have the professional help of the selection of candidates and then let us take it from there is probably our best option.
Hey, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I believe, Frank, in town meeting, we had an article with a certain amount of money to do this, right?
Correct.
Right, so if we hire a company to come in and we advertise out there and we get applicants to come in and they can look at this and do what they normally do, and then they come before us. Say we have 5 applicants, we can maybe, have the first hearing and maybe get it down to 3 or 2, and then have the final secondary hearing and make our decision.
Yeah.
The callbacks of the most important ones, and then make our decision. I mean, to have a full committee of 5 or 6 people, I think is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, Dan, when you don't use a committee, you would operate, the Board of Selectmen would essentially be the committee. You would operate
Right, exactly, yeah.
with the contractor, and you would be presented with a list of candidates for perhaps, depending on how you set it up, for a first interview. That would be a screening interview. It would be an executive session. There would be no names released. When you come down to the finalists that would be considered, that would then be an open session interview by the board, perhaps with the candidate, with the contractor working with the board, preparing a list of questions and information for each candidate.
Right.
But it's either way works. I know the majority of people have used committees, so I prepared an outline for a potential committee. But I can tell you that I'm confident that the Board of Selectmen is fully capable of making these decisions without the help of a committee, if you feel that's
Yeah,
the direction you want to go.
Anyone else? I think the Board of Selectmen is qualified to serve as basically as the search committee, receiving information from a consultant who would narrow down the number of applicants to whatever we decide, actually, 3 to 5, 5 to 7. We have initial interviews with people and then cut it down to those that we want to interview in public. I'm a little bit unclear about whether or not that first round of interviews has to be in public or not, because I can.
It doesn't.
Okay, because there was an issue around that years ago with the school committee when they were doing semifinalists, and it's not clear to me now, looking back, whether or not we were told we needed to have the semifinalists be public.
If you do a
But I also think I remember what you're saying, Frank, that the only people whose names are public are the 3 people or so that we interview and for the job, final candidate.
So from necessity, it would have to be a private or closed session meeting in order to protect the identity of the preliminary candidates. That was the whole idea of that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And okay, yeah, Dan. I mean, yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, once we get the applications of the people who are interested in the position, we can read the applicants ourselves and discuss it through the applicants and not to the person, but with the applicants, what we read, and we can do the pros and cons of how we feel about any particular applicant and what they write down, and we can make our decision that way and then bring the finalists in.
Are you talking, wait, time out. Dan, are you talking about all the applications?
Well, I mean, if we get what do we get? 5 or 6 applications, we can read them ourselves.
Are you talking about applications that we get from a firm that has already winnowed it down? Or are you talking about
application for an administrative position?
You're going to get 50.
Right.
No, seriously.
No, I think we will.
Dan. We don't, Dan, if we're going to read all the applications and winnow it down ourselves to the finalists, we don't need a consultant.
That's true too. All right, then maybe we get a consultant to give us the best 5.
There you go.
Well, I think that's the plan, the idea.
Yeah. Right.
However, we're free to look at all the applications ourselves. I mean, it's,
Yes.
this person that we hire is going to be supervised by us. It's our responsibility. So,
Right.
yeah, we can't not be
We
involved
hire.
in any part of it. Okay. So is that a consensus then? We'll hire a firm to advertise the position, to come up with a number of applications winnowed down to a number, like
Yeah.
5 or so, and then we deal with it from there.
There you go. I like
Is
that.
So
That it?
what I would suggest is that I seek proposals from companies, bring them back to the board. The board can then meet, review the proposals, and decide who they want to engage to assist in the search. Then that company, Dan, will do most of the legwork. They're going to
Right.
weed out all of the applicants that are just not likely candidates
Right.
before they even get to you. Although you can look at every application that's submitted, and some people do that.
Yeah.
But from what I'm understanding, you're going to want a company to conduct a search and present you with candidates that are suitable for interview.
Work for me.
Right. Randy.
And I think this goes along with what Frank had kind of handed out regarding like the job description. So would we have to individually or collectively, obviously, at some point, make like prerequisites of, we're looking for a candidate with X number of years experience, with a specific degree, with, do we need to come up with that, or?
Why don't we put the general statement of duties, and I think that had qualifications on there too, didn't it, Frank?
Yes. What I would suggest,
Why don't we take the time between now and the next meeting for each of us to go over that, and we'll discuss that and revise it or edit it if we have to. And then we can also, once we get a consultant, we can also go over what we have and see if he or she has any.
and that was my suggestion, Carl, that once, you do this preliminary work among the board so that you identified your concerns or your questions. There may be things in the job description you think should be different. So one meeting should be
right
adjusted to that. But you then meet with a consultant and you work out what you expect for services based on his proposal and what services you want to utilize. And I'll start this week. I'll prepare an invitation for proposals.
Okay, good. Did I see somebody else wanted to say something? Yes, Brian.
Frank, did we set aside money for this?
Yes.
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that there was part of the budget.
Yes.
Okay, fine. And at our next meeting, this will stay on the agenda, and we can talk about the job description and get a report from Frank on what he's come up with as far as possible consultants.
So what that leads to is the next question, which is, where am I going forward? I expect that it's going to take at least a month to a month and a half to have a consultant identified and approved by the board. That puts us into, I guess, the end of September. I don't have anything that forces me to leave at the end of September. I had used October as a target date. But what I'd like to do is leave it up to the Board of Selectmen to determine how much time you want me to be available. Do you want me to be here until they complete the process, and I think it probably would make sense, but that's your call, not mine.
Okay, maybe we all can think about that between now and the next meeting and figure out what we want to do with it. Because another possibility would have an interim town administrator for a period of time while we're going through the search.
Right.
Someone that could also be eligible to participate in the search at the same time. But why don't we all think about that? Okay, budget review, Frank?
Where are we?
Anything?
We have a budget. I spoke with the superintendent today. Apparently, Whitman Hanson does not yet have a budget. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has not yet approved their budget. So they're still operating under the 1/12 scenario until they get approval from DESE.
Somebody want to call Chris Lynch?
That's interesting. It's a good thing we rushed to get the town meeting done in July.
Well, my understanding is it's held up in legal, which means they're looking at that agreement we made and figuring out how that affects the rest of the agreement. But hopefully they'll get that done before school starts. As far as operations go, we continue to utilize COVID to a much lesser degree than some of the other communities, and part of the reason for that is we have not been hit as hard. But there are things that the school districts, both South Shore and Whitman Hanson, are going to need that are COVID related, and I've asked Whitman Hanson, and tomorrow I will ask South Shore to make that a priority so we can identify what funding we're looking for from Plymouth County before we get to the end of phase 2 and they want to start turning the money back. So.
Okay. Anyone have any questions of Frank?
Yeah, just have we done a phase 1 reimbursement request yet?
I spoke with Sarah, not Sarah.
Sandra
Wright today. Apparently last week they made rounds handing checks to the communities that had submitted requests for reimbursement. And she was kind of tongue in cheek, well, how come we weren't out to your place? And my response was, because you've been sitting on it for 30 odd days and we're still waiting for an answer. So the tone changed very quickly. But we're waiting for one reimbursement and we are sending the second reimbursement in this week. So we're moving along. It appears that it's taking them longer than they may have anticipated to audit each of these requests, because after 30 days, they're now asking us for receipts. So my guess is it's been sitting somewhere for most of those 30 days, but we'll stay on top of it.
Okay, anyone else? New business, take action to rescind the appointment of Patricia Redfern from the position of matron effective July 1st, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Brian.
Any discussion? Randy?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Take action to renew the fortune teller's license for Stars Tarot Cards on the premises located at 418 Bedford Street.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Brian.
Any discussion? Okay, Brian?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
And I'll say yes as well. Actor on the request of Town Clerk Don Varley to sign the September 1st, 2020 state primary election warrant. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second, Brian.
Second. Okay, any discussion? Randy?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Approve a memorandum of agreement to permit incoming assistant town clerk to receive a stipend.
This is more or less a fait accompli. The former assistant town clerk worked 2 days in July for the clerk's office and then transitioned over to the Council on Aging. Our collective bargaining agreement says that the person holding that position on July 1st is entitled to that lump sum payment of $750. To her credit, the outgoing assistant said, I don't want the money, it belongs to the person taking the job, since that person's going to be here for the year. However, our contract says that the money goes to the incumbent. I did not feel comfortable approaching the union because it's a matter between the parties in the union. So I suggested that Mary, who was offering up the payment, reach out to her union representative, and if they wish to make a deal or an agreement within the union, to go ahead and do that and then come back to us with a proposed agreement, which they did. We have no interest in managing that process, except perhaps on renewal, we may want to look at making that part of a salary number as opposed to a separate lump sum. But they did reach an agreement. They presented it. I signed off on it in order to permit the payment to be made, and I'm asking the board to vote to ratify that signature.
Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion, Dan.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Brian?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Next item on the agenda, the temporary employment authorization, town clerk's office.
Quick summary. The vacancy, the promotion, the appointment by Mary created a vacancy in the clerk's office. Our contract says we have to post it for 5 business days, and then if no one applies, advertise it. However, because of the burden that the clerk's office is experiencing right now due to mail-in voting, and I would say there's approximately 1,000 votes that are going to be done by mail this time around as of today. She has asked that instead of filling the position, we bring a former employee who's a retiree back to work limited hours until the general election. I reached out to the union. The union, in due consideration, agreed to allow us to temporarily fill the position with a person who is not a member of the union, and that we would follow the posting requirements in hiring once the general election is behind us.
Okay, is there a motion to do so?
I will make that motion, Dan.
Second, Brian.
Okay, any questions, discussion? Justin?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. We've done the travel policy. Regal property site assessment.
Lisa is going to discuss that.
Yes, the Regal property, the troublesome vacant lot next to the commuter rail station that has been an eyesore in town for many years. Back in 2017, we had Ransom Consulting perform a phase 1 and phase 2 site assessment of the property. The assessments were paid for through grants through Mass Development. And we've got some ideas of the nature and the level of the contamination, the ground contamination. And basically, Ransom wrote a report and determined that there is a still an amount of work to be done, phase 3 type of assessment to determine a little bit deeper of the contamination as far as what it's done to the soil and the groundwater. They need to do a comprehensive sediment and surface water sampling. They need to assess the risk to ecological characterizations of the land, and also do a human health risk assessment in the nature of the contamination and what impacts it may have to future site occupants and receptors. So currently right now, 3 years ago, Ransom provided us with a scope of work and a quote to carry out the third assessment, which was in the area of $63,900. That work kind of halted right there in the steps because there was a lack of funding to move forward. However, over the last 3 years, there's been a lot of developments for brownfields redevelopment. The state and the federal government has, they've provided funds to help municipalities move forward with redeveloping these brownfields, and grant money has become available that we can apply for to continue our work of the assessment of the property. I'm asking the board just to authorize me to apply for the grant. I need to reach out to Ransom to ask them for an updated proposal and cost. And once we I've been in touch with Mass Development a lot and speaking with them about the grants. Once we submit the application, the grant funds for site assessment are up to $100,000 right now. So we would get enough money to finish the site assessment and know exactly what we're dealing with. And also a crucial part of the final assessment that will help us will be a cost estimate to perform remediation of the property. And once we have that cost estimate, then we can plan and work on a strategy to move forward with the property. Right now, there is a statute out there with the Attorney General that does provide some protection against any liability and suits. If a municipality were to move forward and foreclose, take ownership of the property, there's remedial grants up to $500,000 to help us clean up the property and then market that property to a developer. I've got many emails back and forth as far as our obligations to repay any of these grants. And simply put, if we sell the property and make a windfall, then we would be expected to pay those grants back. If we sell the property and break even, which we won't even because it's been in tax title so long, we're under no obligation to pay back the grants. The goal would be to get that brownfield redeveloped and get it back under the tax rolls. A huge selling point for the Regal property is it's right next to the commuter rail station. There will be lots of eyes on that property once we know what we're dealing with as far as remediation, and also the assessment of what the impacts will be on future use of that property as far as the contamination. And basically, I have been doing some research. There's lots of information out there on the Brownfields Redevelopment Fund. And one location I looked at is because we did have a wetland survey done, and it was determined that probably about just under 4 acres of that property is developable, as there's no wetlands there. there was a brownfield property in Jamaica Plain that was 3.36 acres, a former brownfield. And a developer did take over the property and was able to develop a 132 units of housing, retail, office space, and self-storage buildings, which also created 90 jobs out of that development. So even though it's a small 4 acres, there's still a good possibility of mixed use for that area. And being right next to a train station, I don't think that we're going to have a lot of trouble marketing that property.
Okay, great. Anyone have any questions of Lisa?
Great
I'd like
work.
yes, I'd like a motion then to vote to allow her to reach out to Ransom Consulting to request an updated proposal and then to apply for a site assessment grant.
I'll make that grant, Dan. I'll make that motion, Dan.
Second, Brian.
Any questions? Any further
Yeah.
discussion?
I have a question.
Yep.
Lisa, are we looking preferable to have a business there and not residential?
It would depend on who's interested in the property. It could go either way. You know, it's like I said, it's 4 acres. There's a lot of potential there. We just have to see what comes our way and what kind of interest we get in the property.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll vote on it then. Randy?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes.
Thank you.
Our next meeting date. Thanks, Lisa. What do we want to do about meeting again?
25th?
Why?
I don't know. It's a Tuesday. It's 2 weeks from now.
I think
It's
our
2
practice
weeks
has been
from
to meet once in August and once in July, right?
Right.
I think if you plan on meeting September 1st, we
All
should
right.
have some progress on
September 1st is the election.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So September 8th.
Ooh.
Is there a reason to meet before September 8th? Frank, I'm looking at you.
I'm not aware of anything that's going to require board action until we get the RFP out and collect that information and present it to the board. And it's going to take at least 3 weeks to do that.
Okay.
Probably more.
Okay. How about September 8th then as the next meeting? And then 2 weeks after that, there'll be another meeting.
8 and 22.
8 and 22, how does that sound?
There you go.
Works for me.
Okay. Old business, discuss the CPA ballot question. Lisa, you're up again.
Yes, so we were very fortunate to have town meeting vote to adopt the Community Preservation Act. Now the act will move forward to the ballot, and board approval is needed to include that ballot question on the state ballot. We have to submit that basically by September 4th for it to be printed on the ballot. And we just need board approval to move forward with that.
Okay, is there a motion?
Now, this is a ballot question, so the motion has to include the entire language of the ballot question because it's going to have to be certified by the town clerk in order to go on the ballot.
Is what we have here is that what we have here from Lisa?
I believe so. I'm digging that out now.
Shall the town of Whitman accept sections 3 to 7
Yes.
inclusive chapter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we have it here then. We have it here to vote on.
But you have to read it.
What? What did you say, Frank?
You have to read it. It has to be.
I have to read it?
It has to be in the form of a motion.
All right. Where's Mike Silly when we need him? Okay, I want someone to move this. Shall the town of Whitman accept sections 3 to 7 inclusive of chapter 44B of the general laws as approved by Whitman town meeting on July 27, 2020, a summary of which appears below. Sections 3 through 7 of Chapter 44B of the Massachusetts General Laws, also known as the Massachusetts Community Preservation Act, provide a local option to establish a dedicated funding source for the, number 1, acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space; 2, acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of historic resources; 3, acquisition, creation, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of land for recreational use; 4, acquisition, creation, preservation, and support of community housing; and 5, rehabilitation or restoration of open space and community housing. Examples of open space and recreational properties include parks, playgrounds, athletic fields, drinking water supplies, and conservation areas. In Whitman, the act will be funded by an additional surcharge of 1% on the annual tax levy on real property to be assessed beginning in fiscal year 2022, which begins July 1st, 2021, and by annual distributions from the State Community Preservation Trust Fund. Only communities that accept the act receive a distribution from this state trust fund. The following will be exempt from the surcharge. Number 1, property owned and occupied as a domicile by any person who qualifies for low-income housing or low or moderate income senior housing in Whitman, as defined in Section 2 of said act. And number 2, $100,000 of the value of each taxable parcel of residential real property. Exemptions and abatements of real property will not be affected by this surcharge, and a taxpayer receiving such an abatement or exemption will also receive a prorated reduction of the surcharge. If accepted, a community preservation committee composed of local citizens will be established to study local needs, possibilities, and resources, and to make recommendations on the use of the funds, and all expenditures must be approved by town meeting. The act will only take effect in Whitman if a majority of the voters voting on this question vote in the affirmative.
So moved, Dan.
Second. Any questions or discussion?
Can you repeat that? No.
I know, you know it's good as Mike, I'm moderator.
Funny guy. Randy.
Yes.
Wake up, Randy. I know that was a long thing.
He said
Brian.
yes. Yes.
Brian. Dan.
Yes.
Yeah, and Justin.
Yes.
That was fun. Okay, Lisa,
yeah.
I think, Lisa, are you still on the docket here, Lisa?
Yes, yes.
Okay, on the Mass Development Brownfields Redevelopment Fund?
That
Or is
would
it something
be
else?
the housing production
The
plan.
housing production plan, right?
Yes. Okay, so she's approaching probably just almost a year ago. We received a grant from Old Colony Planning Council to help the town to develop a housing production plan, which has to do with the state 40B requirement for communities to provide at least 10% of its housing to low-income families. So the Old Colony Planning Council created a draft which I submitted to the planning board. Two of the requirements for state recognition of the HPP is that it is approved through the planning board and then the Board of Selectmen. I did appear before the planning board 3 times and answered questions regarding housing production plan, the reasons behind it. The planning board ultimately voted to not recommend pursuing the housing production plan. Very disappointing. The reasons that they set forth, I did not agree with. I found unsubstantiated and arbitrary. I did move forward with speaking to Old Colony Planning Council on asking the Department of Housing and Community Development for a waiver requiring planning board approval. They did come back and deny that request. So at this point, without both planning board and selectmen approval, the document cannot move forward. It's disappointing that adopting this housing production plan and then having it being recognized by that department would have opened up some grant opportunities for us regarding MassWorks infrastructure program, which right on its grant application has a housing production plan listed, and communities that have an HPP recognized do get priority in these grants. The infrastructure program is a competitive grant, and without that document in place, we are not moved. We are not looked at as a preferred community. So we do lose out on some grant opportunities without this document in place.
Okay, that's disappointing. Thank you, Lisa. Does anyone have any questions for Brian?
Lisa, you said the state requirement is 10%. Do you know what our current percentage is?
We're about 3% right now, 3 to 4%.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, the next item on the agenda is the act on request to permit limited senior volunteer activity. Frank?
As you know, the senior center has been closed and continues to remain closed. That's the most at-risk group we have. The director, Mary Holland, has made a real effort to come up with opportunities that we may be able to offer to seniors, particularly where it comes to the use of the senior workfare program. We had discussed this a couple of meetings ago, and so we were going to limit participation till at least January. The proposal that you have before you is a proposal that I think works under the circumstances. The participants will not be gathering in the senior center, but rather will be working from home. There may be an opportunity to set up some outdoor space where we could bring a couple of people together in a working environment, but with the outline that Mary has prepared, limiting contact and limiting interaction. So I would like to recommend that we permit the senior center to utilize this limited operation plan to see if it meets the needs of the senior center and the volunteers that'll be working with it. I'm comfortable that if everything is followed as it's outlined, it should not pose any risk to the senior community.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the procedures?
I will make that motion, Dan.
I'll second that, Brian.
Discussion?
Yeah, Frank, I have a question. Is there a way that we could put out a memo to all department heads asking if there is anything in-house that can be accomplished by the senior program, that although the buildings are not open, there may be something within the building that needs to get done?
Dan, we're small enough to not have to put a memo out to do that.
I mean, yeah, you know what I mean?
But I hesitate. I hesitate to open the buildings to senior participation during this crisis.
Even though there's nobody there, other than employees?
Well, we only have employees here and we're not letting anyone in, Dan.
Yeah.
That's the most vulnerable group we have.
Yeah, okay.
It's worked so far, and I'd hate to jeopardize it.
Okay.
Brian?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that I agree with Frank on this, but I understand Dan's idea. But I think that all in all, aside from this at the senior center, I believe that we should probably push the senior program off until at least January. There's still time between January and June for them to get their hours in, and
Yeah.
by then something will happen, hopefully for the better. And I think that we could let's keep our fingers crossed and hope things clear up, and they could still get in their hours. But this is a kind of good test for us I think, to see if it works and if we don't put anybody at risk. So I'm in favor of this particular thing, but I really do believe we should push it off till January, everything else.
For that, yeah.
Okay, good. I agree with that too. Okay, why don't we vote on the procedure? Randy,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
Brian, and I'll vote yes. Next item on the agenda is to extend the energy purchase agreement. Frank?
This is simple. We voted to enter into a power purchase agreement that has saved the town some money. The trend right now is down. I don't know that that's going to continue, but right now we have an opportunity to amend our purchase agreement. And basically it saves, Lisa, what is it? Almost 2 cents per kilowatt?
Yes, so yearly savings is about $7,400.
So I think we should go ahead and do that, but I'm seeking your approval to amend that contract.
Okay. Is there a motion to extend?
I'll make that motion, Dan.
Is there a second?
I'll do
Any
it.
discussion? Any discussion? Okay, Dan,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Randy.
Yes.
Last item on the agenda for old business to discuss the regional assessment process. Randy had asked that we discuss this in open session since it's been discussed openly on Facebook and at the last school committee meeting, and he has some thoughts. Randy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting it on. Obviously, this is something that drastically has affected our two towns. Over the last 6 or 7 months now, we've talked about partnership, and in the last budget process, it was done to preserve that partnership. What I feel now is, and I just want to get a sense of the board, and that's why I asked this to be put on, is I do think that there is an obvious issue that will remain hanging over the head of that partnership between the towns and the school district until it's properly addressed. What we've learned throughout this process is that when ed reform came in, that our agreement may not have lived up to proper compliance and was obviously never caught. The issue I take place with now is that through documents that were found by Ms. Green, through documents that have been uncovered over the last couple of years, and a statement I'm going to read from a regional agreement committee meeting. What we know now is previously, there's nothing that points to a actual malfeasance, let's say. Why it was never discovered, I don't know. But there's been recent, the talking point was, we never knew. I thoroughly disagree with that statement that somebody did not know. And I'm going to read a statement from a regional agreement committee meeting from January 29, 2018. I previously spoke about this meeting. It's on YouTube. And a Mars representative speaking at that meeting stated, about 3 minutes into the meeting, we have to make a little adjustment in our schedule. Steve Vai and Steve Henneman came down a few weeks ago and met with, and not to violate open meeting law, he states, 2 district employees, former district employees, to go over the assessment business. We worked something in, but there are still some things that need to be fixed before we give it to you. That was going to be our main issue tonight, was to talk about that. So we are going to have to postpone that to our next meeting, discussing about the financial thing, the assessment. A short time later in that same meeting, the same representative states, we have set up a meeting to come down again to work the get the right language in there under the assessments. We will be ready the next meeting. We apologize that we are not as ready as we thought we would be for tonight. That right there tells you there was 2 meetings by 2 former district that this gentleman had with his group with 2 former district employees where the statutory method was discussed. So it goes out the window that nobody knew about this. Unfortunately, we did not know about that. And when I say we, I mean the towns of Whitman and Hanson. So when I made the call to the chairman that asked us to be put on was right after the last school committee meeting where we saw school committee member Fred Small make a motion calling for his committee to look into this through a third-party investigation where we as our board would be included, and we would include Hanson as well. If there's anything that I want to make clear in this statement, my goal to look into this is not for any financial retribution. It is not anything financially other than the fact that I believe the towns of Whitman and Hanson are owed a proper explanation and are able to provide accountability to the taxpayers, plain and simple. And with a proper explanation, I think it'll come out that this is not the town of Whitman picking the town of Hanson's pockets, that there was an obvious act that like a process was flawed, Hanson benefited, and we were on the other end of that. And I think this needs to be looked into. And I would just ask, from the statement that were made the other evening, there was some, I would say, one member of the school committee made some statements as if current sitting selectmen had covered this up. I think that is an egregious statement. I think this board has been on the forefront of trying to find an answer to this. And I think I personally want to see us, if we talk about partnerships, I would like to see us all sit in a public meeting with Whitman and Hanson and the school committee or whoever the school committee may choose as their representatives. And this needs to be aired out properly. And maybe as a group, as partners, we decide to push forward with a third-party investigation. And I would just like to know how the board feels about that.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Would anyone like to respond to Randy? Yeah, Brian.
I agree with Randy 100%. I believe that we need closure. Both towns need closure on this. I don't believe that we're, by doing this, we're trying to nail somebody to the wall or look for revenge or any of that stuff. We owe this to the taxpayers of our community who elected us to find out what happened and to remedy it so it can't happen again. Now, was it a mistake? Was it incompetence and then a cover-up? Who knows? Nobody knows. But we should ask an independent person like the Inspector General to look into this and see what they come up with. You know, by doing that, it won't cost the town anything. Let them do the work and come to us with an answer, a conclusion, because we owe that to the citizens. You know, why did we pay $4.5 million more than we should have? And if anybody thinks that we shouldn't get to the bottom of this, then they know something more than I do. And maybe there's people that are trying to cover that up. I don't know, but we need to find out. And I think the buck stops with this board. And if we don't do our due diligence to come up with those answers, then we're wrong.
Thank you, Brian. Dan.
Okay, I agree with both Brian and Randy as far as we need to find out exactly what happened. But that being said, we have 10 elected officials, 6 from Whitman and 4 from Hanson. Are we overstepping our bounds by going over their head? Or I'm talking about not just the selectmen of Whitman, but the selectmen of both boards of Whitman and Hanson. Are we going over the school committee's heads by doing this, or should we let them take the ball and run with it and then present it to us, and whether we accept it or not? That's the decision. But I think that the ball, and I know that there's the new member of the school committee, I mean, he seemed to want to take the ball and run with it. You know, do we let them throw out the first pitch and see what they come up with? So we don't overstep. I mean, they are elected officials, just like we are.
Justin.
My only concern with that, Dan, would be that this becomes a sort of proxy fight. We go to the IG, the school committee goes to the attorney general, Hanson may pull some other inspector, some private lawyer into this, and we're going in different directions, and it's turned into a mess. I'd rather see all three boards come together in a public meeting and agree that we would like the answers to this. Let's use the inspector general and provide them with all the information. Yeah, I want to be, I think I'd rather see us be part of this than let someone else handle it.
Okay.
Anyone else? Randy.
I don't want to be any more long-winded than I already have been, but as part of our conversation, Mr. Chairman, when I read this over to you and discussed why I wanted this on, I actually did end up sending it. I got the contact information from the gentleman that spoke on that January 29th meeting. I did send him an email yesterday. And I have not gotten a response. The only response I got was I just sent a second email to confirm. But if you'd like, I can read it, or I can waive the reading and give a brief synopsis. But what I asked was, in these meetings, was it discussed that the statutory method had to be inserted into the agreement to make it compliant? I did get an email back that he confirmed receiving my email, and he would be getting back to me at a later date, and had not gotten back to me as of the start of this meeting.
Okay,
but I figured that would be one way where maybe it's not the IG and we got an answer on it.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Brian.
Yeah, just remember when the idea of everybody wanting to be inclusive, to include all three, and I don't have a problem with that. But the school committee voted 7-3 against having any taste for going after the answers and the truth. So I think that they've handed the torch off to somebody else, and that should be it.
If I may comment,
excuse me, I thought they tabled it.
Right.
That was my understanding too.
Table it.
I understand that, but
it was 7-3 vote to table it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Listen to that conversation from the start to finish, and they may have voted to table it. They have no taste for it. They're not going to do anything about it.
We'll have to see what they're on their next agenda.
Right. But I can.
Yeah, see, I was actually agreeing with Dan here that we have 10 elected officials. It's their issue. It's their issue. If there was laziness or malfeasance or ignorance or whatever around the method of assessment they were supposed to use, it was their issue, not ours. So I have some hesitancy to say that we need to have all three groups together to do this.
Well,
I'd be perfectly happy if they carried the ball and took care of it. On the other hand, Justin made some sense to me too. So I'm not exactly sure how I feel. I think it's been clear for a long time that we all know what we're looking for. It's been very clear. It's been very clear that at least since 2016 or 17, depending upon whether you want to use when a Whitman citizen wrote an email to the superintendent asking about the statutory method, to the discussion of it at the RAC meetings that have been talked about at the school committee meeting and on Facebook. at our own meeting when Randy brought up the term statutory agreement, and I didn't know what he was talking about, and then we found out eventually. It's been clear for a long time that there was a method of assessment that the school committee and the administration was legally bound to use, or if they wanted an alternative assessment method, to have it be voted on. And as I understand it, it would need to be voted every year. Otherwise, it defaults to the statutory method. That didn't happen. And we made it clear as a board of selectmen that we knew it didn't happen. And then last September 2019, we actually made a motion to ask the school committee to adopt the statutory method for this year. And that led to everything that happened this year. We moved the ball on that. We threw out the first pitch on that. What was interesting to me was that the meetings that Randy talks about, there are a group of people that were there that were working on amendments to the regional agreement that was passed over by this town meeting eventually, by our town eventually, passed in Hanson, then rescinded in Hanson. And amongst the people that were at that meeting was our chair of the finance committee. He was at all 6 or 7 of those meetings. He knew about it. He knew about the statutory method. Did we get any advice from our finance committee over the last 3 years that maybe we should be using this? I don't remember it. As far as I know, the selectmen have been not been informed about this until it was brought up in 16 and 17. And we know that in 2007, DESE was concerned enough that people weren't following across the state, weren't following the statutory method, that they set out a document of guidance, which we didn't receive. It went to the schools. I've asked Frank a number of times to try to find out, to whom did it go to at the schools? Did it go to the superintendent? Did it go to the school committee? Did it go to the business manager at the schools? This guidance document in 2007. And Frank hasn't been able to find it, to get an answer to that. Is that correct, Frank? You're muted, Frank. Frank?
Let me try.
Yeah, you're muted again, Frank.
All right, there we go. I have searched our records to see if we ever received anything, and there is nothing in our files to indicate that we have. The bulletin, because it came from DESE, goes directly to the school districts. We don't receive bulletins from DESE at all. For whatever reason, the state split that down the middle. Schools are one world, towns are another. So we have
which goes to Dan's point that this is basically the school's issue to deal with.
We have no way to track who may have received that and when they may have received that. I can state with certainty that the first time anyone in the town saw that document was, Randy, I believe 2018, as a result of a school committee meeting where a resident there quoted from it, and we all scrambled to try and find the document. So it is, who knows if anyone even kept records that long ago. You're allowed to destroy records on correspondence after 6 years. I don't know what the maintenance policy for record keeping at the schools are, but I suspect it would be very difficult to identify who received what when. You know, the question, what did you know and when did you know it, is something that would have to be answered by the former superintendent and perhaps even the former finance director, because that would have been the window of time
Right.
that came in.
Yeah, Brian.
The only, I had taken one exception to what you said, Carl, and I agree with everything else you said, but the analogy that I'm going to simplify everything out, and what I believe is, if you got a bill from your cable company and it was really a lot more than normal, a lot of times you'll dispute it. But if you thought everything was about what it was supposed to be and you just kept paying and paying and paying, you wouldn't really know. And I know Dan's gonna like this, but because he loves disputing bills. And we have $4.5 million worth of disputing bills here. So it is our problem because it bypassed the school committee and now they're not gonna do anything about it. So.
Well, no, it didn't bypass the school. It didn't, Brian, it didn't bypass the school committee. The school committee allowed a situation to continue occurring that caused that to happen.
But I think
what we looked for from the school committee each year was an assessment, our share of the budget, and we got it every year, and it was done according to pupil percentages. We didn't question that. Apparently, the school committee didn't question it. What it caused was that $4 million increase to us over those years. Every town meeting in which we voted a budget based upon that assessment, our town ratified. So when someone says that we knew what we were doing and we did what was legal, they're not necessarily wrong. However, we were not fully informed as to what the procedure should have been. And there were people back, at least we know in 2017 and 18, who should have known. At least 2017. Dan's shaking his head. He's one of those people because he was on that committee too.
Yeah.
And he heard them talk about statutory method. With all due respect to Fred and the school committee, it's not a dirty little secret. It's open. We've known about it. We've been trying to figure out what to do about it. I'm not sure what good comes out of our meeting with the Hanson Board of Selectmen and ourselves and the school committee to say that they should write a report, that somebody in the school department should write a report or investigate what we all know they were doing. We know it. We know it. Somebody just has to be straight about it. Somebody has to tell us that they did this. That's all we really need. And what I'd like from Hanson, I'd like from Hanson to acknowledge that for a number of years we were carrying them.
That's not going to happen.
And we were.
Yeah.
We were. I'd like them to acknowledge that we were carrying them. We made sacrifices in our town so that our schools could get the funding that they said they needed. And it was based upon a faulty application of the assessment method. And we know that happened. I don't know if having a year or 2 years investigation into this by an independent party, no matter who it is, I don't know what that's going to do for us, except give us information that we already have. What we have to do, what Hanson has to do, is to try to figure out how they're going to deal with using the statutory agreement next year. Mm-hmm. They have to figure that out. What we have to do as a town is to come to a realization, independent of this, that if we want the kind of town that our citizens want, we're going to have to deal with an override over the next couple of years. Irrespective of all of this, I'm not sure what good the investigation will do because we already know what it's going to lead to. The only thing that we don't know is that there's somebody that we can place a blame on. I don't know where the school committee member says that there were members of the Whitman Board of Selectmen or a member that knew about this, because I know that that's not true. I know that that's not true, except for Dan, who was at those meetings. But Dan was on the South Shore He was on the South Shore VOTEC school committee, who used the statutory method forever. So when he hears the term, it doesn't mean anything to him. I mean,
Right,
it means something to him, but it doesn't mean anything to him.
Right. I was under the assumption that we were using it at Whitman and Hanson like we do at South Shore Tech.
Right.
I mean,
And actually, what's wrong here is that we had people in the Whitman school system, and we all know this because people have seen these papers, that signed that we used the statutory agreement
Right.
when we were not using it.
That's
We're
an
not
issue.
using it.
That's an issue.
And we know it's an issue, but we know that it happened.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Randy. I don't mean to carry on like that.
No,
Randy.
but I ultimately think, you know, we are now going almost right back to where this started last August, right? And what I keep on going back to, and this is where I want to make myself clear when I make the statement. I do not believe the current administration is responsible for any of this. I would say this is where, if they are guilty of anything, it's possibly just mishandling it. And I do understand why that, you know, the budget, and then you want to protect the district as much as you can. But Carl, like you said, these are the things we now know. We know they covered this up. It's pretty clear. They knew about it. We have documents that they signed, that they sent into the state that are falsely filed. Financial documents.
The administration did.
They had 2 meetings. So this whole thing is nobody knew. They had 2 meetings. It's documented. 2 meetings. It was discussed, and they never let Dan. They never let Rick. They, you know,
right.
I agree. Like, you're volunteers at the end of the day. You're volunteers. It's like we rely on the town administrator and the assistant town administrator that the information that Lisa may have presented tonight about the Brownfields is accurate.
Right.
Because they are the professionals. We try to be as educated as possible, but they're the professionals. And this is where the professionals knew about it. And one of these professionals was still on the staff.
We're losing you, Randy.
You know what? Maybe that's what we're looking to get, Kyle. We're looking to say, you wronged us. And through that, you have accountability. You have the explanation. And what I think it does ultimately is it rebuilds that partnership, because right now you go on social media and you have evil Whitman picking the pockets of the town of Hanson,
right,
putting them into a financial crisis, when all we are truly asking is that a process that they knew about should have been followed, and our citizens should have been given the opportunity to decide whether or not they wanted the statutory method or use an alternative method. Plain and simple, it's about doing the right thing.
Right. Couldn't agree more.
Okay, I think everybody agrees on that, but what role do we need to play right now that's going to make the situation better?
You know what?
What do we do now?
Here's the problem I have with, you know what? Yeah, the only thing I'm going to disagree with Brian is it was tabled. So yes, but you know what? I did not see that this was exurgent. Oh yeah, we'll pick this up at another meeting.
Right.
Now I do understand that maybe Fred's motion, you know, that was not a motion that we were gonna like all of a sudden start kicking doors in and locking people up. It was a motion to get the ball rolling. And maybe it's because the people mentioned, you know, maybe it should have been some school committee members were empowered to work with us. But I think nothing bad comes out of saying, you know what, we're gonna lead this into a group meeting where we can decide where we're gonna go. We were the grieved party, and that's why I think, you know, why do we want the school committee leading the charge on this? In the school district, we're saying they did something possibly wrong. We're the grieved party in this. We should be driving this bus. But I think it should be a bus driven, picking up Hanson and picking up the school committee. So when we get to our destination, our bond is a lot stronger and our mission is unified in just figuring out what went wrong so it doesn't happen again. And I'm sorry I've been so long.
That's okay. That's okay, Randy.
Yeah, I am passionate about it.
Yeah, to my earlier point, it does seem like this is underway, whether it's the statement or documents released on Facebook by a member of the school committee a couple of weeks ago that seems to be ongoing, or what Randy's saying, this is already starting to happen. I would still rather see us involved than hand it off and wait for the results from the school committee.
Well, I've had a conversation with the chairperson of the Hanson Board of Selectmen already prior to our town meetings. And he was interested in having a meeting amongst the two boards and the school committee at that time. And we were going to get back to each other after the town meetings. I can still do that. We can set up some kind of a meeting. His idea, I think, was to have it in executive session because we would be considering possible litigation. I don't think we're suing anybody. I think what we're doing is deciding if the Attorney General is the proper person to go to. Although I understand from Frank, I think, that the school committee member who sent out that long letter sent it to the Attorney General and was told by the Attorney General that that was not the proper place to go. It should go to the IG. Is that correct, Frank?
That's my understanding, yes.
Your understanding? So maybe if we get the three committees together to meet, I think it probably should be an open session though.
I was going to say, Carl, in this type of a meeting, I absolutely think it should be open session. People should be party to it. People should hear what we're talking about and understand what's being asked. I mean, I don't think this current school administration could be in a better position than they are to step up and say, we know something was done wrong. We want to bring it forward. But because I don't think they're going to share in that culpability. But I think the public has had so many versions of this that a meeting that involved all three groups would enable people to get a firsthand sense of what's in play.
And you think when those three groups get together, that's what's going to happen?
Well, it depends on who moderates it.
Now, the other thing I want you all to keep in mind is that we have a school department now that is trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do about opening school and how they're going to open school with COVID-19. I mean, their agenda is full, folks.
And apparently get a regional agreement approved.
What?
And apparently they need a response from DESE.
Right.
Yeah, but do we want to be? Do we want to be taking their time to get a meeting of the three groups together to talk about something that happened a while ago, over a number of years, that we all know about? Is there fruit to that? Given the fact that these poor people have to come together with some kind of an operation that's going to teach the kids and keep them healthy at the same time. Is that what you want to do? We want to say, let's stop it and let's go back. Let's have a big meeting and we'll think about what happened ever since 2016 or 2007. Is that what we want to do? Dan?
Okay, I agree with Randy on basically everything he said except for one thing. Randy, when you turned around and you said, we rely on our town administrator and our assistant town administrator to give us a synopsis of what we need to deal with and vote on and what we think, what we assume what they're telling us is the truth. I say the school committee's in the same situation. You get 10 members of the school committee that rely on the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the business manager to give them the facts and the figures. And then they make a decision like we do. So to say that they're possibly part of the issue, I think, is wrong. I think that they weren't. I think they were going on what they were told by their superintendent, previous superintendents, present superintendents, previous business manager, present business manager, what information they receive, and then they make their decisions based on that information, just like we do with Frank and Lisa. My opinion.
Yeah, and if you want to, in extension, we look to the school department and the school committee, our elected school committee members, to give us information about whatever money we need to spend each year. That's where we get it from them.
Right.
What I'll say is, you know what, Dan? Why am I emailing this gentleman from Mars? Why do I have this stack? It's regarding this. Because I haven't seen too much work out of the school committee. Oh, all right. Let me hold up my stack of documents. Why do I have this stack of documents, Dan? As I hold them up again. Why have I emailed the gentleman from Mars? Where have the answers come throughout the last year from the people that we're saying they're in charge of this? So, you know what? COVID isn't going away. They're going to be forced to have to deal with other things other than when the kids are going back, just like we are. Normal business goes on. If this is the new normal, then we're going to have to put a little bit more in our backpacks when we're getting to work every day.
Right.
So.
No, I understand. No, I understand where you're going. I understand you've done an awful lot of work on this. But I think the school committee are trying to not discuss it, but you do have members of the school committee now that want to discuss it and find the facts. And I think we ought to see what they come up with in another meeting if they discuss it. And if they say, well, we're not going to do anything, then the two boards of selectmen take the ball in hand and go with it.
Why don't we do this? Why don't I contact the chairman in Hanson, and I'll contact the chair of the school committee. We'll try to set up a joint meeting for the 15th of September. How does that sound?
Fine.
Justin?
I like that idea. I would just amend that it does appear that there may be some ongoing litigation with the school committee. So I preferred an open session, but if they would want to meet an executive session, I would understand that as well.
All right.
Well,
All right. Well,
find the litigation.
what's the litigation that they have, Justin?
Whatever they were discussing in their last executive session. I'm not privy to it, but
right. All right. If that's the case, then we'll have to find a date when Michelle is available too, if it's executive session, because I want our attorney there at the same time. But I'll see if I can set something up.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Work for me.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian, Justin, that works for you? Brandy, that works for you? Okay. I'll put that on my list of things to do. Anything else on the discussion of the regional assessment process?
I just want to thank Randy for all his hard work on this.
Oh yeah, he's done a hell of a job.
Consumed a lot of time, and I appreciate all the extra time you put into it, because if not you, we would probably not have known this.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a long time. And actually, let's not forget Citizen Chris George.
Right.
Who brought it up initially. And you know what? And I keep forgetting what really bugs me about all this. What really bugs me about all this is not how we share an assessment with Hanson and we paid more than we had to. What bothers me more is the fact that something that George Farrell actually admitted at one point within the last year or two, that there have been inequities in the way the money is spent. There have been inequities in the way the money is spent. Not the way it's assessed to each town, but the way it's been spent. And all I can think about are two kids who wanted to take foreign language in Whitman.
Could not.
And they had to go into a lottery and they couldn't take it. But any kid in Hanson that wanted to take it could. That's not a problem of assessment.
Right.
That's a
Fortunately,
problem
the
in
solution
management.
was to eliminate foreign language at the middle schools.
Well, the solution was to eliminate it. Yeah, that's like your mother telling you, well, none of you can eat cake because you're fighting over it.
I remember that.
Drives me absolutely crazy.
Oh, I want cake.
Let them eat cake.
I've just sent a email out to all of you with the link for executive session,
Oh, great. Thank you, Frank.
which should be short, by the way.
Okay, by the way, okay, I guess we're finished with open session. Does someone like to move to adjourn into executive?
So
We need to go
moved.
we need to go into executive session in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Exemption 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body. Is there a
So moved.
motion?
Don't move,
Is there a
Dan.
second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, Dan?
Yes.
Vote yes. Randy?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. We're going to adjourn into executive session. We'll be coming back in open session only to adjourn. So now we leave this meeting.
See you in a minute.